John Stossel is a former journalist and has a YouTube channel where he shares his conservative take on the world. He recently released the video, Environmentalists' Calls to Tear Down the Dams Won't Save the Salmon, but Will Waste Your Money. The video begins.
Activists claim the dams threaten the Snake River. They call it
the most endangered river in this country.
Because they say the dams are
decimating the salmon population.
It's true that pregnant fish need to swim upriver to have their babies. And now there are dams in the way. But still, today, most fish pass.
So let's look at Stossel's claims and see if they hold water or if they're a bit fishy. First, who am I? My name is Andy Silber, and I'm a longtime environmental activist on energy issues, and have a PhD in physics from MIT. When I founded the Energy Committee for the Cascade chapter of the Sierra Club in 2001, one of my first conversations was about these dams. My focus is on climate, not fish and forests like most people in the Sierra Club at the time, and they cared very much about removing these dams. I committed to not talking about removing them, but instead focused on shutting down coal plants and building renewables. That was over 20 years ago, and for the first time, I'm going to talk about removing the lower Snake River dams. Since Stossel doesn't cite his sources, I don't know why he says that most of the fish pass through the dam. But that's not even the correct question to ask. First, they need to swim upstream, navigate around the dams using the fish ladders, find good habitat that hasn't been blocked or destroyed. Then the female lays her eggs and the male fertilizes them. Then the fry hatch and the small fish have to reverse the journey, hazarding the dams. Sometimes they make it through the dam alive, but injured, and they die later. They may face many predators, including raptors, who hang out near the dams waiting for the fish. Hopefully, they make it out to sea, grow big, and repeat the cycle. And this is nitpicking, but salmon don't get pregnant.
How?
Well, there are ladders on the dams that allow passage.
Todd Myers of the Washginton Policy Center has worked for decades on salmon recovery.
To say that Todd Myers has worked on salmon recovery for decades is a bit misleading. He is the Vice President for Research at the Washginton Policy Center, a conservative public policy think tank. According to LinkedIn, he has degrees in politics and international relations, and the closest he's come to experience in the fisheries is a year spent at the Seattle Mariners as Director of Public Affairs.
Recovery includes
new innovative surface passage structures for fish
and fish ladders that help fish get past the dams.
We have made so much progress that we can have salmon recovery and the electricity it provides.
The fish ladders have been there since the beginning, and they've proven insufficient. There have been improvements made since the dams were built in the 60s and 70s, but I was unable to find any study that suggested that these improvements are sufficient for the recovery of the salmon. I did find some text on the Army Corps of Engineers website saying that, quote, overall these improvements are making a positive impact on salmon and steelhead returns. This is great, but it doesn't imply that these changes are sufficient for salmon recovery. To the contrary, I found many studies like this one by the NOAA Fisheries for the Columbian Basin Partnership, or CBP. For Snake River stocks, the centerpiece action is restoring the lower Snake River via dam breaching. You'll find a link to that study in the description. If you're aware of any study that shows that salmon stocks can recover without dam removal, please share them in the comments.
But gullible media still repeat the activists' claims.
The salmon population near extinction.
That's simply not true. All you have to do is to go and look at the actual population numbers to know that that's absurd.
Here they are. Although the first dams did kill lots of salmon, in recent years, salmon numbers have been higher than they were in the 80s or 90s.
This chart is quite misleading. The starting point is after the construction of the final of the 4 dams. It does show the improvements that have been made since then, but it doesn't show the pre-construction baseline. I like this table from the NOAA study better, where you can see the current level of salmon abundance compared to the CBP median, which is what recovery looks like. They also compare current levels with historic levels to understand the full impact. Only the Snake River Fall Chinook is close to recovery, and the Coho and Sockeye are at less than 1% of the goal. And to be clear, the goal is not to reach historic levels, just to get them to attain a healthy population.
But somehow, government media claim
salmon numbers are so low that tribal biologists say some species have reached a quasi-extinction threshold.
They make these claims because they know people will believe them.
just sounds right.
Yeah, exactly. They don't even need to check it. They just absolutely believe it.
Extinction of salmon are unacceptable.
They've never been closer to extinction than they are today.
People don't want to believe that their favorite environmental group is dishonest.
We don't, but some are. They raise money by scaring people.
As someone who has volunteered my time to environmental causes for decades, no one is wasting their time fighting for something they don't believe in. No one is scaremongering just to raise money.
They're willing to tear down these dams even though they generate tons of clean electricity.
Almost the same amount as all of the wind and solar turbines in Washington State.
According to a study produced for the federal Bonneville Power Administration, it will take between 2,300 and 4,300 megawatts of replacement resources if the dams are removed. You can find a link to that study in the description. According to the Northwest Power Conservation Council, about 9,000 megawatts of wind capacity have been developed in the Pacific Northwest. So if by almost you mean between a quarter and a half, okay, I guess.
They say just build more wind turbines.
The problem is that several times a year, there's no wind.
This argument is completely disingenuous. No one is suggesting we tear down every dam, or not build solar farms, or transmission lines that can bring in power from regions where the wind is still blowing. I have an entire video on how to build a stable grid with wind, solar, and transmission.
Will do serious damage to our electrical grid for a tiny benefit to salmon.
In the BPA study, they looked at what it would take to replace these dams. It wasn't free, and the cost would be passed on to ratepayers. The average bill would go up by about 10% or less, which isn't nothing, but the electricity in this region would remain among the cheapest in the world. And not for a tiny benefit, but to allow salmon to recover. The region has already removed 2 dams for the benefit of salmon on the Elwha River in the Olympic Peninsula, and it's been a huge success. So we have evidence that removing these dams will lead to significant salmon recovery.
If you want to spend $35 billion on salmon, there's lots of things we can do that would have a real impact.
Like
Seals and sea lions.
they eat lots of salmon.
The Washington Academy of Sciences says that unless we reduce the populations, we will not recover salmon.
People used to hunt the sea lions.
Yeah, and that's why the populations are higher today than they were 200 years ago.
The public doesn't want you shooting sea lions.
That's exactly right.
Looking at this table, we see the different hazards that Snake River salmon face. For all species, the hydro system, direct and indirect, is number 1. Predation, and that's all animals, not just the seals, is at most the 3rd most important factor. So dealing with the seals might help a bit, but because of the Marine Mammal Protection Act, we can't hunt them without a change in federal law. And the study from the Washington Academy of Science focused on the Salish Sea. I expect most of you have no idea where that is, but it's the Puget Sound around Seattle and north into Canada. It also covered Washington's coastal waters, but the Snake River is a tributary of the Columbia, which forms the Washington-Oregon border. In other words, this study focused on other watersheds. The study that I quoted from the NOAA Fisheries is focused directly on the Snake River.
So instead, politicians push destroying dams.
Because it's sexy and dramatic. It sells.
I don't know what politicians he's hanging out with, but my experience is they are dragged to the dam removal process very reluctantly. Politicians like solutions where everyone is happy or at least ambivalent, but taking down these dams has impacts on farmers that aren't trivial, and politicians don't want to be held responsible for making it harder to get grain to market. The fact is, the politicians would love to point to a federal study that says what we're doing is sufficient and we can just let the dams be. And to be clear, I'm not saying that we should remove the dams. It's a tough call, impacting lots of players. But we should make informed decisions, and Stossel's video provides misinformation. If you've learned something, please like and subscribe to my channel. And if you liked this video, you might want to enjoy one of my other fact-checking videos that you can find here. And please share this video with anyone you know who thinks that salmon get pregnant.